Hey, what's up? Welcome to another upload from Aspie with Attitude. My name is David. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. I have a speech difficulty and a speech impairment, and I'm autistic. I'm a autism spectrum. I have Asperger's syndrome, and that's why I'll call myself an Aspie. And for this episode, before I begin getting deeper into it, you'll notice something a lot different. Instead of my Lego, I've got all these Campbells soup tin, and I'm about to explain what's with the Campbell's soup tin. Because for this episode, I'll be talking about whether if Andy Warhol was actually on the autism spectrum. So I'm going to sit right back and put that can back as we try to look into the pop art, fine arts movement, and also to give out clues why I think that Andy Warhol, the pop artist from the 1960s, was autistic. So now it's time for me to leave the couch. And also I'd like to say, sit in the other room for Aspie with Attitude. Keep watching to find out whether Andy Warhol was actually autistic. Before I begin discussing why is Andy Warhol autistic, have you seen my video upload on the 18th of January 2019 called Was Van Gogh Autistic, which was episode 38. This is already one famous artist had previously shed light upon, discussing whether if Van Gogh was autistic and why was he autistic. And also, please find the thumbnail at the very end of this video content if you are interested or you haven't seen this video yet. And also, please click on the card to view this video, because now for this 140-second video upload from Aspie with Attitude, I'll explore how and why the pop artist from the 1960s, Andy Warhol, would have most likely been on the autism spectrum. And we're going to be exploring the life of Andy Warhol and the pop arts movement that started in 1955 and worked its way to 1970. And please sit back and listen to watch this whole entire video content from Aspie with Attitude. Before I begin discussing Andy Warhol, what you really need to understand is what pop art is all about. I'm going to actually explain the whole entire pop art movement. It was since after World War II had ended back in 1945. It wasn't till like the mid-50s the changing world had faced the second industrial revolution. It all began in 1955 as the second industrial revolution had reshaped everyday society of its times. It was over in the UK and over in the USA, a new fine arts movement called pop art had emerged, lasting up until 1970. Pop art had brought fine arts into the second industrial revolution using imagery from consumerism, advertising, and mass culture, like all your comic book superhero characters, your Disney characters, and your Warner Brothers characters throughout the 1950s and the 1960s. Since this was a changing world, as it all moved on from the Great Depression that happened throughout the 1930s, and throughout the 1940s we had World War II, pop art had worked through the abstracts from consumerism product labels like Coca-Cola, with their iconic red and white labels and its wavy fonts that we always see on Coca-Cola cans, and also its oddly shaped bottles that's full of that dark brown sweet fizzy beverage that we know of today. And pop art had used irony, satire and parody from these consumer brands, and labels like Coca-Cola had become the dynamics of advertising and the key player to inspire these fine arts, just like what Andy Warhol did. And pop art had been the focus of using manipulative symbolic devices like these two golden arches that we're familiar with McDonald's, and also a handful of superhero cartoons, Disney characters, all applied to define contemporary visual arts, all coming from the late 50s, throughout the 60s, and we're all finished in 1970. It was back in episode 38. I had already spoke about the post-impressionist artists from Europe in the 1870s and the 1880s, going by the name of Vincent van Gogh. I had explained how Van Gogh's work had gave us hints about his autism from his repeated brushstrokes, as Van Gogh had painted his repeated behaviour from the 1870s and the 1880s. And also, you can find the thumbnail at the end of this video content if you're interested in finding more about whether Van Gogh was actually really autistic. And now, this time round, I'll be moving into the 1960s when an American artist, Andy Warhol, became an iconic figure in the pop art movement. Andy Warhol was born on the 6th of August 1928 in Philadelphia. He will live through the Great Depression and then through World War II. It won't be till the 1960s he'll live his glory days as an important artist of the pop art movement. And apart from Andy Warhol being an iconic pop artist of the pop art movement in the 1960s, it's likely that he was also autistic. And since that, filming and television was a thing in Warhol's heydays as a pop artist, well, even if you search deep on YouTube, you'll just notice in Andy Warhol's TV interviews that he used minimal amount of words in his speech. Many TV interviews that Andy Warhol had showed monosyllabic speech, and he aped a vocabulary of a teenager in the interview he did in 1966, if you can find this out on YouTube. Andy Warhol's form of verbal dyslexia and strange speech patterns was part of his own autistic traits. Despite that Andy Warhol was a talented artist, he was also very poor at reading and writing. It was only through his artworks he displays obsessions with numbers and consumer labelling, like the Campbell tin soup cans that I've got along this table here, and that you've seen throughout whole video content instead of my Lego. It was Andy Warhol's work on the soup cans shows his obsessions of repetition, giving us much needed clues that Andy Warhol was on the autism spectrum. Well, exactly the same thing with his works on Marilyn Monroe, referring to a 1950s Hollywood actress who died in 1962. Andy Warhol indeed had a difficulty in recognising who his friends were due to his social deficit. Even Andy Warhol continued to compulsively draw while people talked around him, and he was able to focus hard on his drawings in such a noisy, loud environment, especially with all this huge amount of chitter chatter going on in the room. It's been taken by surprise that it appears that Andy Warhol had no sensory challenges, as what we already know of. Well, that's what history tells. And Andy Warhol's love for repetition could have been his Aspie superpowers. And unfortunately though, Andy Warhol had died on the 22nd of February 1987. And now that's all you need to know about whether Andy Warhol was really autistic. And I think it's just time for me just to return to my couch to sign off from Aspie with Attitude, episode 142. Before I sign off from episode 142, it was also in the late 1960s when pop art was at its dying phase. A Danish engineer from Philips Electrics, going by the name of Finn Handel, has first televised this back in the late 1960s. And please let me know in the comments down below if you think that the PM5544 test card is actually pop art. And now, all thanks to my autistic YouTube blog channel called Aspie with Attitude. Would you label my works on the PM5644 or the PM5544 test card as the next generation of pop art? Please tell me in the comments down below. And also, if you really enjoyed this channel and you haven't yet done it, please why not subscribe to Aspie with Attitude. And also, if you'd like to keep up to date with my YouTube channel, please don't forget to ring the notification bell to keep up to date with Aspie with Attitude. And please also don't forget to like and share my videos with your friends, with your family, with your autistic group, and or autistic Facebook groups, and also through autistic forums like autismforums.com or wrongplan.net. And now I think it's time for me to sign off, and I'll pull this one off with a fidget spin nose trick. And I'd like to say thanks for watching, thanks for listening to Aspie with Attitude, peace and respect, and see you next time.